If white Americans are law-abiding and Christians have reverence for the cross, how in the world did the KKK even exist? Hello, Internet friends. My name is Susie. I am your hostess. Welcome to It's Okay to be Clown-Pilled. All right, everyone. I hope you're wearing sturdy underwear. This is going to be a bumpy ride. How Prohibition fueled the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. I'm sure you're saying, what? I'd never heard of this. Have you guys ever heard of this? Okay, so from this article, it looks like the KKK started during the Reparation era. Reparation, that's the era that we live in now. I mean the Reformation era. And all of the lawlessness cooled down, and so Americans were able to put their ghost uniforms away, and then they had to pull out their ghost uniforms. I don't know why it's ghost uniforms. Maybe Catholics are just as superstitious as Africans are. Because from what I understand, that the ghost uniform was to intimidate the Africans if they were breaking into people's houses or whatever and stealing. So people would put on their ghost uniforms and scare them. They'd leave. There would be no altercation. But anyway, so Americans put on their ghost uniforms and they rallied together. They got Prohibition put in the Constitution, the 18th Amendment. How's about that? And this was the reason, according to this article, that they put that in the Constitution because they were worried that the Catholics were going to vote them out of their country. How about that? It sounds like Americans were much more informed back in the 1920s without television and internet than we are today. And if you see in this article, the Catholics brought in the saloon culture. Now you see the old westerns and their saloons or whatever. I don't think that we had saloons in America before Catholics came here, because if you read any of the old if you read any of the old diaries, but it doesn't mean it didn't exist, but they never talk about saloons. But you see it in the westerns, and you see gambling, and you see, this is really bad. I'm an American, and I don't even know what these saloon girls were. They called saloon girls the hooker, the whore. I know in French they're called fille de joie, which is, it's a no-no. It's a no-no word. So I don't know. It's I guess whore and hooker, those are no-no words too. But whatever you call them in the saloons. Anyway, so we can probably trace back degeneracy to the saloon and Catholic people coming in, and Catholic people are heavy drinkers. What's interesting is that I can't really drink very much alcohol. My sister jokes and says if I stand too close to a cocktail, then I get drunk. Or if I put my finger in it, I get drunk. Yeah, I'm really that sensitive. Like when I go out to a bar, I'm like, oh yeah, can you give me half of whatever you give everybody else? And they look at me like I'm weird. And I'm like, well, maybe never mind. I'll just skip the alcohol this time. Sad, isn't it? I wonder if anybody else has that kind of reaction. I just don't like being drunk. It just makes me feel gross. I mean, I like a little bit of alcohol, maybe a couple times a year, but not every day. And now I'm talking about myself, and that's kind of weird. Anyway, so the KKK was an American nationalist movement. No wonder the media and everybody is all got their knickers in a bunch over it. And what's really weird is that we are paying reparations to the American Indian and black people, or at least the black slaves. No, black people, we pretty much pay reparations to those two groups because, welfare is a form of reparations. So if we conquered these people, why are we paying them reparations? Any idea? Anybody got any idea? Apparently we are the conquered peoples. If we're the ones paying all the bills. What I find really weird is that white people are extremely peaceful and tolerant, and we're supposed to believe that back in the late 1800s when the KKK was at its greatest, that they were running around and they were grabbing black people and they were hanging them, just randomly picking out any old black person out of the group. We're gonna hang you, as though suddenly, or in our past, white people didn't live a life of law and order. We were a lawless people and we did lawless things, but now we're just a law and order people, and we like to live in a structured, law-abiding society. And it just happened after like the mid-1900s. White people just suddenly wanted to be civilized and live in a lawful society. At least that's what the media is leading us to believe, right? And during the time we were hanging all these black people, we were burning crosses. Because Christians, they just stopped burning crosses recently. They used to burn crosses all the time, but they just stopped burning crosses when they decided to live in a civilized society. Well, I can't believe, what really shocks me is that white people believe the lies about their own people. White people know themselves the best, and they believe these lies. It just blows my mind. How can they think that their ancestors acted like that? We're an extremely law and order, law-abiding people. People who were hung, they were tried in a jury, and the person who was hung, a judge had to order that. It wasn't just like willingly people were grabbed and hung. There's a huge history there. It's absolutely hidden. You have to search for it. It's kind of difficult to find, but it's out there. Why is it that white people believe lies? Why? Why are we so easily manipulated? It's just so sad. We're like the smartest group out there, and we're the best looking. And why are we so easily manipulated? I had to throw that in there, the best looking part. All right, so the reason I got into this is because I was questioning, how come we don't know anybody who is ever in the KKK? Apparently the KKK was even out west here in the state of Oregon, because Oregon is a Confederate state. Why don't I know anybody in Oregon who is part of the KKK or related to anybody who's part of the KKK? I only know one person who told me that black people were not allowed to stay the night in some cities in Oregon, like Newberg, Oregon. After dark, black people were not allowed to stay there. This was up until the 1980s, you guys. Can you believe that? Given that the KKK was in our recent history, why don't I know anybody who is in the KKK? Do you know anybody who is in the KKK? We should know people. We should know stories. I've heard people who lived through the Great Depression talk about the Great Depression. I've heard people talk about the Dust Bowl from Oklahoma. I've heard people talk about all kinds of stuff that happened in American history. I've never met anybody who was part of the KKK, who knew anybody who was part of the KKK. So I just think it's a fabricated history. That's me. That's kind of where my mind is going. Is this a fabricated history, or is this a real history? You guys will have to let me know. I did some research to find out about Catholics in the United States, and they started to come in from the poor countries like Ireland and Lithuania and Italy about the mid-1800s, probably around the time of the Civil War. I did a little research to see when the Catholics first started coming into the U.S. About the early 1800s is when they started coming in. And the Catholics used to rule in Europe, and they were very cruel to Protestants. They would hang them, torture them. They would even put them on a rack and break them. Have you ever seen that? That is the most heinous thing that I've ever seen in my life. Just because you're the wrong religion, they would rip you in half or hang you. That is just amazing. So it is understandable that Catholics were hated. All right, internet friends, that is all the damage for now. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to your thoughts below.